The Chinese Super League's $2 billion implosion. November 12, 2020. Jiangsu FC lifted the Chinese Super League trophy. Confetti fell. Players celebrated their first championship in club history. 108 days later, the club ceased to exist. Not relegated, not sold. Dissolved. The reigning champions vanished before they could defend their title. Players learned through social media. Staff received text messages. 5 years earlier, Chinese football had detonated the global transfer market. Between 2016 and 2019, Chinese Super League clubs outbid Barcelona, Manchester United, and Bayern Munich for the planet's elite players. Oscar left Chelsea for Shanghai SIPG on £400,000 per week. Carlos Tevez joined Shanghai Shenhua on wages exceeding £650,000 weekly, temporarily making him the highest-paid footballer on earth. Hulk, Carrasco, Witsel, Paulinho, Europe's established talent flooded eastward on unprecedented contracts. The investment thesis appeared straightforward. China's 1.4 billion population represented football's final untapped market. Deploy capital aggressively, establish market dominance before competitors. Within a decade, the Chinese Super League would generate revenue streams rivaling Europe's established leagues. The model operated on projected growth rather than current fundamentals. Clubs spent far beyond operational revenue, subsidizing losses through parent company capital injections from property developers and industrial conglomerates. Guangzhou Evergrande alone hemorrhaged hundreds of millions annually during this expansion phase, banking on China's rapid maturation into a sophisticated football economy, generating billions in broadcasting rights and commercial partnerships. December 2020 delivered regulatory shock. The Chinese Football Association imposed strict financial controls. Domestic players capped at 5 million yuan, approximately £600,000 annually before tax. Foreign players limited to €3 million, roughly £2.6 million before tax. A 100% transfer levy meant clubs paying £50 million for a player owed another £50 million to the CFA's Youth Development Fund. These restrictions eliminated the liquidity fueling the league's expansion. Simultaneously, China's property sector collapsed. Evergrande Group accumulated over $300 billion in liabilities, debt equal to 2% of China's entire GDP. When corporate parents faced insolvency, football operations became expendable assets. Jiangsu FC dissolved in March 2021. Guangzhou FC, 8-time champions and 2-time Asian Champions League winners, couldn't meet payroll by late 2021. The club was relegated in 2022 and formally disbanded in January 2025. Hebei FC, Chongqing Liangjiang, Tianjin Tigers. Clubs that had deployed tens of millions on foreign talent all disappeared within 24 months. International players abandoned contracts mid-season when wage payments stopped arriving. The Chinese Super League spent an estimated $2 billion learning what English football required a century to understand. Sustainable football operations demand patient capital, community infrastructure, and revenue generation aligned with expenditure capacity. Juventus's financial engineering experiment. Juventus spent the 2010s constructing a business model founded on aggressive capital gains accounting, a strategy for competing with Europe's wealthiest clubs without matching their operational revenue. By the early 2020s, that system had produced board resignations, regulatory sanctions, and reputational damage eclipsing any sporting achievement. The mechanism operated through player asset valuations. When Juventus sold or exchanged players, they recorded the spread between sale price and depreciated book value as profit. Standard accounting practice. The innovation came in execution scale and structural dependency. Juventus orchestrated high-valuation youth player exchanges with other Italian clubs. Prospects with negligible first-team exposure valued at 15 to 20 million euros. Both clubs simultaneously recorded capital gains, artificially improving balance sheets without cash liquidity changing hands. Regulators eventually identified over 40 such transactions, generating approximately 282 million euros in artificial profits across 3 seasons. Cristiano Ronaldo's July 2018 arrival for 100 million euros amplified financial pressure exponentially. Juventus now carried 31 million euros in annual amortization expense plus wages at 30 million euros net, roughly 60 million euros gross under Italy's tax structure. Combined annual financial commitment, approximately 90 million euros for a single asset. The investment thesis required deep Champions League runs annually to generate offsetting revenue. When early eliminations materialized, Ajax in 2019 quarterfinals, Lyon in 2020 round of 16, Porto in 2021 round of 16, the financial architecture faced immediate liquidity stress. Management response intensified the capital gains dependency. Investigators flagged 62 inflated transfers across 2018 to 21 seasons, with player trading profits becoming the club's primary balance sheet stabilization mechanism during COVID restrictions that devastated traditional revenue streams. Italian authorities and UEFA investigators scrutinized valuation methodology. Were assigned values market-reflective or artificially inflated to manufacture accounting profits? In November 2022, Juventus's entire board, including chairman Andrea Agnelli and vice president Pavel Nedved, resigned following criminal investigation findings. Europe's elite clubs generate 500 to 700 million euros in annual operational revenue. Juventus generated approximately 400 to 480 million euros. That 150 to 250 million euros structural deficit couldn't be permanently bridged through accounting mechanisms without eventual regulatory intervention. The club was initially docked 15 points, later reduced to 10, excluded from European competition for 1 season, and fined 700,000 euros. Agnelli received a 24-month ban from Italian football. The FIGC stated definitively, "The financial statements are simply not reliable." What happens when a football club treats financial engineering as competitive strategy instead of secondary function?
Everton Stadium debt trap. March 2024. Everton sits 16th in the Premier League, 2 points above the relegation zone. At Bramley Moor Dock, construction crews work on a £760 million waterfront stadium that will hold 52,888 supporters. The structure rises daily, the team sinks weekly. Rewind to February 2016. Farhad Moshiri purchases his Everton stake with a vision: transform a historically significant club through aggressive capital deployment. Over 7 years, Everton spends over £500 million net on transfers, investment without commensurate return on sporting performance. Gylfi Sigurdsson costs £45 million. Alex Iwobi, £28 million. Moise Kean, €27.5 million. None become consistent performers. The squad accumulates expensive assets without tactical coherence or residual asset value. Management cycles at rates preventing strategic continuity. Ronald Koeman spends £140 million and is dismissed after 16 months. Sam Allardyce, Marco Silva, Carlo Ancelotti, Rafa Benitez, Frank Lampard, Sean Dyche. Each inherits squads assembled for contradictory tactical frameworks. Each manager's strategic vision expires before implementation. On-field performance stagnates, finishing 8th, 12th, 10th, 16th, 17th between 2017 to 2024. Operational revenue remains flat while wage obligations increase. The club operates within narrow liquidity margins while facing Premier League profit and sustainability rules, limiting losses to £105 million over 3 rolling seasons. The stadium project intensifies financial pressure during maximum operational vulnerability. Construction commenced in 2021. Inflation drives costs from £500 million to £760 million. Interest rates on construction financing rise. Everton must fund operations, including elevated wage commitments, while servicing stadium debt obligations and maintaining construction payment schedules. Back-to-back relegation battles coincide precisely with peak capital expenditure requirements. Ownership uncertainty compounds structural challenges. Mashiri explores multiple divestment processes. Potential acquirers withdraw. Commercial partnership negotiations become progressively difficult. Everton receives 8 points deduction for profit and sustainability breaches in 2023 to 2024, the first Premier League club penalised under current regulatory framework. The Commission determines losses of £124.5 million against permitted threshold of £105 million. Fast forward to present. The stadium rises, the team fights relegation. The two trajectories, capital ambition and operational reality, run parallel but never intersect. The new stadium may eventually generate revenue streams justifying capital outlay, or it may stand as monument to the most expensive strategic misalignment in English football history. The outcome remains unwritten.
Malaga and Anzhi, the vanishing billionaires. Some football projects are built on sporting ambition, others on wealth so vast that football budgets seem recreational. Malaga CF and Anzhi Makachkala represent what happens when those recreational projects end. Malaga, under Sheikh Abdullah Al Thani, moved with stunning speed. Between 2010 and 2012, the club signed Cazorla, Isco, Joaquin, Toulalon, reaching the Champions League quarter-finals in 2013. They were 90 seconds from eliminating Borussia Dortmund when 2 late goals ended their run. The model's flaw emerged not in tactics, but in dependency. When funding slowed, wage disputes followed. Players went unpaid for months. UEFA banned Malaga from European competition due to outstanding debts. The club began selling assets. Isco left for Real Madrid. By 2018, they dropped to Spain's second division. Anzhi Makachkala repeated the pattern with even greater drama. Russian businessman Suleiman Kerimov decided to build a competitive club in Dagestan, a region facing security challenges requiring players to live in Moscow and fly to Makachkala only for home matches. Kerimov signed Samuel Eto'o on wages reportedly exceeding €20 million annually, among football's highest ever. Roberto Carlos joined. Anzhi spent over €100 million in 2 years, qualifying for the 2012 to 2013 Europa League. In August 2013, Kerimov announced the project's end. High-earning players were sold immediately. Willian to Chelsea, Eto'o joining the same destination. The competitive squad disassembled within months. The irony? Both clubs still exist. Malaga plays in Spain's second tier, with 21,000 fans attending matches in a stadium built for 30,000. Anzhi lost professional status in 2022 after years in Russia's lower divisions. Their ambitions produced brief moments of genuine quality, but monuments don't survive when built on single individuals' checkbooks. Red Bull's multi-club experiment, the system that hasn't broken yet. Every story so far ended the same way: financial collapse, bankruptcy, dissolution. Red Bull is different. The clubs generate profit, the system works. Players develop, teams win. So why are we talking about it in a video about failed business models? Because Red Bull's football empire is built on dependencies that haven't been tested yet. And when those dependencies get tested, the entire structure could unravel faster than any collapse we've covered so far. Red Bull's football network began in 2005 when they purchased SV Austria Salzburg. In 2006, they bought the Metro Stars in Major League Soccer, renaming them New York Red Bulls. Then came the controversial move. On May 19, 2009, Red Bull purchased the playing rights of SSV Markranstadt, a fifth-tier German club, and created RB Leipzig. They founded Red Bull Brazil in 2007 and later purchased Clube Atlético Bragantino in Brazil in 2019. By the 2010s, Red Bull operated something football had never seen. Multiple clubs across different continents sharing the same scouting database, tactical philosophy, and coaching methodology. And it worked brilliantly. Leipzig climbed from Germany's fifth tier to the Bundesliga in just 7 seasons. Since reaching the top division in 2016, they finished in the top 4 6 times. They reached the Champions League semi-finals in 2020. Red Bull Salzburg keeps producing elite talent. Sadio Mane, Erling Haaland, Dominik Szoboszlai. The business model is simple. Identify undervalued talent before market prices inflate, develop players within Red Bull's pressing system, sell to Europe's biggest clubs at massive profit. Dayot Upamecano to Bayern Munich for €42.5 million. Ibrahima Konate to Liverpool for £36 million. Josko Gvardiol to Manchester City for €90 million. Red Bull turned player development into investment portfolio management. But here's the problem. The entire system runs on one company's money. Red Bull GmbH, the energy drink company, funds all of this. We're talking €200 to €300 million per year across all their football clubs. This isn't a traditional ownership structure where clubs generate their own revenue streams. It's a marketing budget. Red Bull uses football to sell energy drinks. Dietrich Mateschitz, the billionaire who founded Red Bull and created this whole football project, died on October 22, 2022. For 17 years, one person believed football was worth the investment. Now a board of directors makes that decision. What happens if the board decides Formula One gives them better brand visibility? Or that esports reaches younger demographics more efficiently? Or that €300 million annually could be better spent elsewhere? The day Red Bull GmbH decides football doesn't serve their marketing strategy, the entire network loses its funding source. There's no backup plan, no alternative revenue that makes these clubs sustainable independently. The regulatory risk nobody's talking about. In 2017, both RB Leipzig and Red Bull Salzburg qualified for the Europa League. UEFA investigated whether two clubs owned by the same company should compete against each other. Could they manipulate results? Transfer players strategically to benefit one team? UEFA eventually allowed it, but required Red Bull to prove the clubs operate independently. Since then, regulations have tightened. UEFA introduced stricter multi-club ownership rules in 2023 to 2024. City Football Group faces similar scrutiny. Here's the scenario that could break everything. Both Leipzig and Salzburg qualify for next season's Champions League. Under strengthened regulations, UEFA says they can't both participate because of common ownership. Leipzig has to choose: either sell the club and leave the Red Bull network, or give up Champions League football. Champions League revenue is worth €50 to €80 million per season. Without it, Leipzig can't afford their wage bill. Players leave. The development pipeline breaks down. And if Leipzig exits the network, what's the point of the whole multi-club structure? One regulatory change could fracture the system Red Bull spent 20 years building.
The transfer market dependency. Red Bull's entire strategy assumes the transfer market keeps working the way it does now.
They assume clubs will continue paying 60 to 90 million euros for promising 23-year-old players. But what happens during a market correction? Erling Haaland spent one season at Salzburg before Borussia Dortmund activated his 20 million euro release clause. Red Bull developed one of the world's best strikers and made minimal profit because Haaland's agent had negotiated exit terms. Leipzig keeps losing their best players the moment they reach elite level. Timo Werner, Dayot Upamecano, Christopher Nkunku. Every time Leipzig builds a genuinely competitive squad, the best pieces get sold. The system is optimized for player development, not for winning championships. That creates a ceiling Red Bull can't break through. They probably never will, because the model requires selling your best players to maintain profitability. The cultural paradox. Inside Leipzig, the club has built genuine local support. They regularly fill their 47,000-capacity Red Bull Arena. The city's young population has embraced the team. But step outside Leipzig and the reception changes entirely. German football culture has rejected the club's corporate model. Away supporters boycott matches. Protest banners appear at every away ground. The 50+1 rule, which requires German clubs to be majority-owned by members, was specifically designed to prevent what Red Bull created through legal loopholes. Leipzig has local support but national isolation. Manchester United could get relegated and still maintain global fan-base loyalty because people care about Manchester United beyond results. But Red Bull's model depends on success. If the team stops winning, if the development system stops producing profits, what holds the local fan base when corporate priorities shift? So why haven't we seen the collapse yet? Because all the risks are structural, not immediate. Corporate funding continues. Regulations haven't changed yet. But the dependencies are there, written into the foundation. What makes Red Bull fascinating is they've built the most efficient football operation in modern history. And that efficiency might be exactly what prevents them from seeing the collapse coming. They've optimized everything: scouting networks, player development, tactical systems, revenue generation. Everything except the one thing that makes football clubs survive across generations. They've built local support in Leipzig, but they haven't built something that transcends corporate interest. The moment Red Bull GmbH changes strategy, and corporations always eventually change strategy, what protects these clubs? Red Bull's clubs are efficient, profitable, and successful. But efficiency isn't the same as resilience. They need people who care regardless of results. Leipzig is building that locally. But is it enough to survive without Red Bull's billions? Red Bull's model hasn't failed yet, but it's the only model in this video built entirely on dependencies that could vanish overnight. The question isn't whether it could fail. The question is whether they'll see it coming when it does.
Parma, the bankruptcy spiral. March 2015. Parma Calcio's players arrive for training. The laundry service has been cancelled. They wash their own kits in the showers. The image crystallizes institutional disintegration. Not poor results, not tactical failure. Players hand-washing training gear because the club can't afford €500 weekly for laundry services. Parma won the UEFA Cup in 1995 and 1999. They claimed the Coppa Italia 3 times, in 1992, 1999 and 2002. They produced Buffon, Cannavaro, Crespo. In the 1990s, Parma competed with Juventus and Milan for Serie A's elite positions. 15 years later, players washed their own kits. The descent happened gradually through ownership instability. After the Parmalat corporate scandal in December 2003, Parma changed hands multiple times. Each transition brought promises about investment. Each ownership group struggled to generate revenue for Serie A operations while managing accumulated debt. By late 2014, the laundry services stopped. Then, team buses. Then, matchday operations barely functioned. Parma couldn't meet payroll. Players went months without wages. Serie A threatened point deductions. Creditors lined up. Small businesses that serviced the club, catering companies, equipment suppliers, filed their own claims. Some never recovered money owed. The Italian Football Federation declared Parma bankrupt on March 19, 2015. Players still hand-washing kits. That's how institutions die. Not dramatically, but through accumulated indignities. Parma restarted in Serie D under new ownership. The climb back took 3 years, winning Serie D in 2015-16, Serie C in 2016-17, Serie B in 2017-18, returning to Serie A by 2018-19. The club exists today and competes in Serie A. The laundry services are paid on time. But somewhere in Parma's offices, people remember what happens when financial governance breaks down completely. Players washing their own kits. That image doesn't fade.
Turkish Super League, a macroeconomic case study. Galatasaray, Fenerbahce and Beşiktaş generate some of football's most intense atmospheres. Their stadiums intimidate visiting teams. Their fan bases create cultural influence extending far beyond sport. But even massive support cannot protect clubs when national economics shift beneath them. During the 2010s, Turkish clubs spent aggressively. Transfer fees increased annually. Wages rose to attract European talent. Didier Drogba, Wesley Sneijder, Robin van Persie commanded salaries matching Europe's elite leagues. The spending made sense at the time. Clubs projected revenue growth from Champions League and Europa League performance. Commercial partnerships would expand. Broadcasting deals would improve. The business model assumed stable economic conditions. That assumption proved catastrophic. Turkish clubs structured their finances in euros. Transfer fees, player wages, debt obligations, all denominated in Europe's currency, because international football operates exclusively in hard currency. Meanwhile, their revenue came primarily in Turkish lira, from domestic broadcasting, ticket sales, and local sponsorships. This created asymmetric exposure. When the lira remained stable against the euro, the model worked. Clubs could service euro-denominated debts using lira-generated revenue without issue. Then, the currency collapsed. Between 2013 and 2023, the Turkish lira depreciated 87% against the euro. A midfielder signed in 2013, earning €50,000 weekly, initially cost 135,000 lira per week. By 2023, that identical wage consumed 1.08 million lira weekly, 8 times the original cost for identical performance. Transfer debts that seemed manageable quadrupled in effective cost when serviced from lira revenue. Clubs that had made rational financial decisions based on stable currency conditions suddenly faced unsustainable debt structures. In 2018, Beşiktaş president Serdal Adalı revealed the crisis in stark terms. Ciro Immobile's €6 million net salary required €10.5 million total after tax and bonuses. Simultaneously, the club paid Vincent Aboubakar €4.6 million to play elsewhere. The forward line alone consumed €17 million, nearly their entire euro-converted broadcasting revenue. This wasn't mismanagement. This was macroeconomic volatility transforming viable business models into financial crises. By 2019, the Big Four accumulated $2.6 billion in combined debt, a 579% increase in 8 years. Multiple Turkish clubs required comprehensive restructuring. The state-backed banking association intervened with a 10-year debt reorganization plan. Clubs negotiated extended repayment schedules. Owners injected emergency capital just to meet operational expenses. UEFA's financial fair play regulations added constraints. FFP measured revenue in euros, the same euros Turkish clubs couldn't generate from lira-based income. Galatasaray increased domestic revenue, but watched their FFP-compliant euro figures decline due to currency conversion. UEFA banned them from European competition for one season in 2016. Fenerbahce and Beşiktaş faced similar sanctions. The clubs faced penalties not for operational failures, but for failing to overcome currency mathematics. Recent years show improvement. Turkish football has adopted conservative budget management. Clubs now stress-test financial planning against currency volatility scenarios. Governance protocols account for exchange rate risk. But the lesson remains. Football clubs operating in economies with currency risk face vulnerabilities independent of sporting performance or operational quality. Even well-run institutions making rational decisions based on current conditions can find themselves in crisis when macroeconomic fundamentals change. Financial sustainability requires planning for worst-case scenarios, not optimization for projected outcomes. If you liked this video and want more deep dives into football's biggest collapses, tactical revolutions, and the business decisions that shape the sport, hit subscribe.